Mr. Thompson, an animal control officer, is called to a rural property where a dog has been reported chasing livestock. Upon arrival, he observes the dog displaying aggressive behaviors towards the sheep, growling and showing bared teeth. Mr. Thompson needs to decide how to safely and humanely handle the situation. What should Mr. Thompson do to ensure both the safety of the animals and the dog? Answer: Mr. Thompson should first assess the behavior of the dog to determine the level of aggression. Given the situation involves potential harm to livestock, the primary concern is to ensure the safety of the animals, but he must also prioritize the dog's welfare. According to the Animal Welfare Act and animal control regulations, the following steps should be taken: assess the situation. The officer must observe the dog's behavior, distinguishing between signs of aggression, fear, or territoriality. Use non-aggressive handling techniques. Using a catch, pull, or leash should be considered only if the dog's aggression escalates. A calm, non-threatening approach is vital. Mr. Thompson should avoid sudden movements or loud noises that could increase the dog's stress. Ensure public safety. If the dog poses a risk to human safety, the officer can use a muzzle to prevent bites, following proper guidelines for muzzle usage. However, this should be a last resort after other non-invasive methods have failed. Transport to safe location. If necessary, the officer can transport the dog in a carrier to a safe facility for further assessment. All actions should be compliant with the Animal Welfare Humane Killing Act regarding humane treatment during transport. What are the key ethical considerations when an animal control officer faces a situation where a dog is showing signs of aggression and must be euthanized to prevent harm to people or other animals? Answer: the ethical considerations in this situation must align with the principles laid out in the Animal Welfare Act 2002 and the Code of Practice for the Euthanasia of Animals. When euthanizing a dog due to aggression, the officer must consider the following: necessity of action. The officer should first exhaust all non-lethal alternatives, such as rehoming the dog, behavioral therapy, or a controlled environment, before deciding on euthanasia. Ethical animal control practices emphasize prevention of unnecessary harm to animals, animal sentience and welfare. The ethical treatment of animals considers their emotional and psychological states. Aggressive behavior in dogs can often be the result of fear or past trauma, and any decision should consider these factors to avoid unnecessary suffering. The Animal Welfare Act mandates that animals be treated in a way that minimizes distress and maximizes their welfare. Public safety versus animal welfare. The officer must carefully balance the immediate need for public safety with the ethical responsibility to treat the animal humanely. The decision to euthanize should be the last resort, taken only if the dog poses a clear, uncontrollable danger to others. The officer must document the decision thoroughly in line with Regulation 4 of the Animal Control Euthanasia Act, which outlines circumstances under which euthanasia may be authorized. Transparency and accountability. Ethical practice requires transparency in the decision-making process. The officer should consult with a veterinarian to ensure that euthanasia, if necessary, is carried out humanely and in compliance with Section 12 of the Animal Welfare Code of Practice. What is the proper procedure for an animal control officer when responding to a suspected case of animal cruelty under the Animal Cruelty Prevention Act 2014? Answer: the proper procedure for responding to a suspected case of animal cruelty is critical to ensure legal compliance and effective action. According to the Animal Cruelty Prevention Act 2014, the officer must: initial assessment. Upon receiving a complaint, the officer must assess the situation by gathering all relevant information, including the type of cruelty reported, the involved parties, and the immediate risk to the animal's welfare. Investigation and evidence gathering. The officer must inspect the animal's condition. If necessary, they should seek assistance from a veterinarian to document injuries, health status, and behavior signs indicative of neglect or abuse. All evidence, including photographs, should be collected according to the guidelines outlined in the Animal Welfare Investigation Manual. Legal reporting. If the officer observes clear signs of cruelty, they must report the findings to appropriate authorities such as law enforcement or the local animal protection agency. This step should be documented in a formal report adhering to the animal control and welfare regulations for proper case documentation. Preventive action. If immediate danger to the animal exists, the officer may remove the animal from the situation in accordance with the Emergency Animal Welfare Protocol. They must inform the owner of their actions and provide them with information on their rights and possible penalties. Follow up. The officer should ensure that the investigation continues until a resolution is reached. This could include arranging for animal rehabilitation or further legal action depending on the severity of the case. How do animal control officers balance the need for public safety with the ethical treatment of animals when faced with A situation where a wild animal poses a risk to the community. Answer: animal control officers must navigate a complex set of ethical and legal standards when handling wild animals that pose a risk to public safety. According to the Wildlife Protection Act 1998, officers should assess the threat level. Officers must first evaluate the severity of the threat the wild animal poses to public safety. If the animal poses an immediate risk, the officer may need to intervene quickly using non-lethal methods where possible. Non-lethal methods. When possible, officers should use tranquilizer darts or other non-lethal capture methods to contain the animal without causing harm. The Code of Practice for Wildlife Management recommends using tranquilizers that cause minimal distress to the animal. Legal protocols. Officers must follow legal protocols, including notifying wildlife authorities if necessary. In some cases, relocation might be a viable solution as long as it complies with wildlife relocation guidelines which prevent the animal from returning to populated areas. Euthanasia as last resort. If a wild animal's behavior cannot be safely managed through relocation or other methods, euthanasia may be considered. However, this decision should be based on an evaluation by a qualified veterinarian to ensure that the procedure is humane and in line with the Wildlife Humane Euthanasia Guidelines. Jane, an animal control officer, is called to a local park where a group of dogs is attacking a lone cat. The dogs appear to be acting under pack mentality, showing heightened aggression. Jane must decide whether to intervene and, if so, how to do so safely and humanely. What steps should Jane take to handle this situation effectively? Answer: Jane should take the following steps. Assess the risk. Jane must first assess the danger to both the dogs and the cat. Given that pack behavior can escalate quickly, she should approach cautiously. Using a catch pole to separate the dogs may be appropriate, but she should first ensure her safety and the safety of bystanders. Minimize harm to the animals. While separating the dogs, Jane must ensure that none of them are harmed. She can use a water spray or loud noise to temporarily distract the dogs without causing physical harm. Rescue the cat. The priority should be to remove the cat from the immediate danger. If possible, Jane should use a carrier to transport the cat to safety without further stress. Containment and evaluation. After ensuring immediate safety, Jane should contain the dogs separately and evaluate their behavior. Reporting and documentation. Jane must report the incident to her supervisors and document her actions according to the Animal Control Incident Reporting Guidelines. If any of the dogs are identified as dangerous, she should follow appropriate legal procedures as outlined in the Dangerous Dogs Act. What are the primary legal considerations for an animal control officer when using force to subdue an aggressive animal? Answer: the use of force to subdue an aggressive animal must be handled with caution as there are significant legal and ethical ramifications. According to the Animal Welfare Act 2002 and Code of Conduct for Animal Control Officers, the following considerations must be taken into account. Proportionality. The level of force used must be proportionate to the threat posed by the animal. Excessive force can be deemed as cruelty, violating the Animal Cruelty Prevention Act. Humane treatment. Any force applied should minimize harm and stress to the animal. The use of force protocol outlines appropriate measures such as tranquilizers or restraints and emphasizes humane treatment at all times. Safety. The officer must ensure that the use of force does not endanger themselves, the animal, or bystanders. The animal control and safety standards mandate the use of protective gear, such as gloves and muzzles, when necessary. Legal justification. Officers must ensure they have a legitimate reason for using force, such as preventing injury to the public or the animal. This should be clearly documented in their reports. How should an animal control officer respond when a pet owner refuses to comply with local animal control regulations? Answer: an animal control officer must follow a formal process when dealing with non-compliance by a pet owner. Under the animal control compliance regulations, the officer should issue a warning. Initially, the officer should provide the pet owner with a verbal or written warning outlining the specific violation and the steps needed to comply. Offer guidance. The officer should explain the relevant regulations and offer assistance in correcting the issue, such as providing information on animal care or how to comply with pet licensing laws. Formal notice. If non-compliance continues, the officer may issue a formal notice of violation. This notice should be documented and include any penalties, fines, or potential legal actions that could be taken under the Animal Control Enforcement Act. Legal action. If the pet owner continues to refuse compliance, the officer may need to escalate the matter to a legal authority for further action, which could involve fines, animal confiscation, or court proceedings under the Animal Welfare Act. What are the primary factors that an animal control officer must consider when determining whether an animal is being neglected under the Animal Neglect Prevention Act 2015? Answer: under the Animal Neglect Prevention Act 2015, the officer must consider physical condition of the animal. Signs of malnutrition, untreated injury, or illness are key indicators of neglect. The officer should conduct a thorough physical examination, possibly with the help of a veterinarian. Living conditions. The quality of the animal's living space is a major factor. This includes whether the animal has adequate food, water, shelter, and space to move. Behavioral signs. The officer should observe any signs of distress or anxiety in the animal that may indicate neglect, such as excessive lethargy, fear, or aggression due to poor living conditions. What legal steps should an animal control officer take when encountering an animal that has been abandoned in a public area? Answer: when encountering an abandoned animal, the officer should immediately assess the animal's welfare. The officer should check the animal for immediate health or safety concerns. If necessary, they should transport the animal to a vet for evaluation. Report the incident. The officer must report the abandonment to local animal shelters or rescue organizations in line with the Animal Abandonment Prevention Act. Investigate the circumstances. The officer should attempt to determine whether the abandonment was intentional or accidental. This includes speaking with witnesses and reviewing any available surveillance footage. Lucy, an animal control officer, is called to a situation where a domestic dog has been left in a hot cart with the windows barely cracked. The dog is panting heavily and there is no one around. Lucy must act quickly. What steps should Lucy take to safely handle this situation, considering the dog's welfare and legal obligations? Answer: Lucy should follow these steps. Assess the situation. Immediately assess the dog's condition. Given the heavy panting, the dog may be at risk of heat stroke. Time is crucial. Contact authorities. Lucy should call for backup, such as local law enforcement or emergency animal services, to ensure that the situation is handled legally. In many regions, leaving an animal in a hot car is a violation of the Animal Welfare Act. Safe rescue. If the animal is in immediate danger, such as heat stroke, Lucy should act to safely remove the dog from the vehicle. If she cannot open the door, breaking the window may be legally justified as a last resort under emergency situations. This is in line with Good Samaritan laws. Cool down the dog. Once the dog is out, Lucy should take the dog to a shaded area, provide water, and if the dog is seriously overheated, seek immediate veterinary care. Documentation. Document the event thoroughly, including the dog's condition, actions taken, and any relevant details for potential follow-up. How can you differentiate between a native and invasive species when assessing an animal in the wild, and what are the key considerations for safe handling? Answer: to distinguish between native and invasive species, you must first understand the key characteristics that define each. Native species are those that naturally occur in a particular region without human intervention, whereas invasive species are non-native species that, when introduced, disrupt the ecosystem by competing with native species for resources. Invasive species may outcompete native wildlife, spread diseases, and alter habitats. Key factors for identification include physical characteristics, size, color, shape, and behavior patterns. Ecological role. Native species typically have established roles in the local food chain, whereas invasive species might not fit naturally into the ecosystem. Safe handling guidelines. Use appropriate gear, gloves, nets to avoid injury and stress to both the animal and handler. Follow the Australian Government Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment's protocols for handling invasive species to prevent further spread. This may include quarantine measures for certain species. Explain the key conservation laws in place to protect endangered species in Australia and how they affect wildlife management practices. Answer: in Australia, endangered species are protected under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999 (EPCAT). This act makes it illegal to harm, trade, or alter habitats of listed endangered species. The PBC Act requires that any action that might affect listed species must be assessed for its environmental impact. Violations can result in penalties, including fines and imprisonment. Key points: threatened species. A PBC Act categorizes species into several conservation statuses, such as endangered, critically endangered, and vulnerable. Protection under the PBC Act is based on this classification. Recovery plans. The Act mandates recovery plans to be developed for critically endangered species, with specific actions to improve their conservation status. In practice, wildlife managers must ensure their activities like habitat restoration or relocation efforts comply with these laws. For instance, relocating an endangered species must be done with careful consideration of its habitat and survival prospects. Mr. Thompson found a stray dog near his property that appears to be in poor health. He is unsure if the dog has an owner, but it seems to be a common breed. What steps should Mr. Thompson take according to animal control protocols? Answer: in this scenario, Mr. Thompson should follow the stray animal protocols outlined by the relevant local authorities. Here's what you should do. Assess the dog's health. Before taking any action, Mr. Thompson should ensure the dog is not in immediate danger or distress and check for any identification like a microchip or collar. Contact local animal control. Mr. Thompson should inform local authorities to report the stray dog. Under the Animal Welfare Act 2002, he may be required to report stray animals, especially if the animal appears to be abandoned or lost. Search for ownership. If the dog has identification such as a microchip or tag, it should be returned to its owner. If there is no ID, the dog may be taken to a shelter or vet to attempt locating the owner. Ensure animals' well-being. If the dog is found to be in poor health, Mr. Thompson should provide basic care, water, food, and seek veterinary assistance to ensure the animal's well-being. What are the principles of positive reinforcement in animal behavioral management, and why is it preferred over punishment-based methods? Answer: positive reinforcement involves rewarding desired behaviors to encourage their repetition rather than punishing undesirable behaviors. This approach aligns with the ethical treatment of animals code of practice, which promotes humane and effective training methods. Principles of positive reinforcement: immediate reward. To reinforce a behavior effectively, the reward should be given immediately after the desired behavior is displayed. Consistency: the reinforcement should be consistent to prevent confusion and ensure the animal understands what is expected. Type of reward: rewards can include treats, praise, or toys, anything that motivates the animal to repeat the behavior. Positive reinforcement is preferred because it builds trust between the animal and handler, reduces stress, and encourages the animal to learn without fear or aggression. It contrasts with punishment-based methods, which can lead to behavioral problems, fear, and a strained relationship with the animal. Why is breed identification important in domestic animal management, and how can misidentifying breeds affect animal control practices? Answer: breed identification is critical in domestic animal management for several reasons. Behavioral traits: different breeds have distinct behavioral characteristics that affect their care, training, and handling. For instance, a breed known for high energy levels may require more exercise, whereas a more docile breed may not need as much stimulation. Health considerations: certain breeds are predisposed to specific health conditions, e.g., brachycephalic dogs may suffer from breathing problems. Misidentifying the breed could lead to inadequate care or failure to monitor for breed-specific health issues. Legal and regulatory compliance: some local regulations might impose restrictions on specific breeds, especially aggressive breeds. Misidentifying a breed can lead to failure to comply with these laws, resulting in fines or legal issues. Accurate breed identification enables animal control officers to follow appropriate handling protocols and provide proper care or reharming strategies based on breed-specific needs. When conducting a wildlife survey, what steps should be taken to ensure that threatened species are properly identified, and what protocols should be followed if one is found? Answer: when conducting wildlife surveys, it is important to follow a systematic process to ensure the correct identification of species, especially threatened ones. Here's how: use identification guides. Use scientific guides and resources like the Australian National Wildlife Collection or Field Guide to Australian Mammals to accurately identify species. Observe behavior and habitat. Record the animal's behavior and the habitat it is found in. Threatened species often have specific habitat requirements. Consult experts. If in doubt, consult experts or wildlife biologists who can confirm the species identification. If a threatened species is identified, follow the EPBC Act. Ensure that all activities such as habitat modification or relocation comply with the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act to avoid legal violations. Report to authorities. Notify local environmental agencies to ensure the species is documented and that conservation efforts are implemented. Miss Williams, a wildlife officer, has been asked to relocate a native bird that has been nesting near a construction site. The bird is not endangered, but its nest needs to be moved for safety reasons. What should Miss Williams do in this situation? Answer: in this situation, Miss Williams should follow the following steps. Check legal guidelines. She should first ensure that the relocation of the bird complies with the Wildlife Protection Act and any other relevant local legislation. Many states require permits for the relocation of native species, even if they are not endangered. Assess the bird's condition. Miss Williams should assess whether the bird is in good health for relocation. If the bird is injured or stressed, it may need veterinary care before relocation. Relocate during off-peak times. Relocating the bird should be done during the least disruptive times, such as early morning or late evening, to minimize stress on the animal. Ensure A suitable habitat, the new location should provide the bird with the necessary resources, food, shelter, and mates to thrive after a location. The focus should always be on minimizing harm and adhering to legal requirements. How do wildlife professionals assess the impact of urban development on wildlife habitats, and what are the primary considerations when determining if relocation is necessary? Answer: wildlife professionals assess the impact of development by evaluating several factors: habitat fragmentation, how the development will divide or disrupt natural habitats. Fragmentation can lead to population isolation and reduced genetic diversity. Availability of resources, whether the development will alter key resources like food, water, or shelter that animals need to survive. Species movement, how the development would affect animal migration and movement patterns, especially for species that rely on specific migration routes. Relocation may be necessary if the development poses a serious threat to the species' survival. The professional must ensure that the new habitat is suitable and that the move will not harm the animal. Relocation strategies should follow ethical guidelines set out by local conservation laws. What is the concept of desensitization in animal training, and how can it be applied effectively in dealing with animals exhibiting fear-based behaviors? Answer: desensitization is a behavioral training technique that involves gradually exposing an animal to a feared stimulus at a low intensity and gradually increasing exposure until the animal no longer reacts fearfully. This method is grounded in operant conditioning principles and is highly effective in treating fear-based behaviors. Steps for applying desensitization: identify the trigger, determine what specific stimulus is causing the fear, loud noises, other animals. Gradual exposure: start with a very mild version of the feared stimulus. For example, if a dog is afraid of other dogs, start with distance and slowly decrease the gap over time. Positive reinforcement: reward the animal for calm behavior during exposure to the feared stimulus. Desensitization helps animals build tolerance to anxiety-provoking situations without the use of punishment, aligning with ethical animal care practices. What are the key steps involved in the recovery and identification of lost or stray pets, and how do they align with local laws on animal welfare? Answer: when recovering a lost or stray pet, the following steps should be taken. Assess the animal's health, check for signs of injury or illness, provide basic care, food, water if necessary, search for identification, look for tags, microchips, or other identifying features to locate the owner, contact local animal shelters and control, notify animal shelters and control authorities, as they may have databases or processes for reuniting pets with owners. Adhere to local animal welfare laws. Ensure that the handling and recovery of the pet comply with local animal welfare acts, which may have specific procedures for reporting, sheltering, and returning lost animals. By following these protocols, animal control officers ensure that lost pets are treated humanely and efficiently, reducing stress and increasing the chances of reuniting them with their owners. MS. Carter, a resident in your jurisdiction, reports that her neighbor frequently allows their aggressive dog to roam the neighborhood without a leash. The neighbor claims that their dog is friendly and doesn't require a leash. MS. Carter feels unsafe and is considering filing a formal complaint. As an animal control officer, how should you address this situation considering community awareness and legal compliance? Answer: understand and confirm the complaint. Politely gather all necessary details from MS. Carter about the incidents, including dates, times, and specific behaviors observed. Confirm whether there are other witnesses or any evidence, such as photos or videos. Educate on leash laws. Approach the neighbor and explain the legal requirements for leash control in your jurisdiction. Cite the specific ordinance, such as Section 12.4 of the Leash Control Act mandates all dogs must be leashed in public spaces to ensure public safety and animal welfare. Highlight that leash laws also protect the dog from harm. Diplomatic conflict resolution. Emphasize community safety rather than confrontation. For example, while your dog may be friendly, we need to ensure all community members feel safe. Leashing your dog will prevent potential misunderstandings or accidents. Enforcement steps if non-compliance persists. Issue a formal warning with details of potential fines or penalties for repeated violations. Document the complaint and actions taken for future reference. What are the best practices for handling confrontations diplomatically when dealing with the public in animal control situations? Answer: handling confrontations diplomatically in animal control situations is essential for maintaining public trust and ensuring that animal laws are followed without escalating tensions. The best practices for dealing with confrontations include: remain calm and professional, Always maintain a calm and composed demeanor, regardless of the situation. Avoid raising your voice or becoming defensive. Speak clearly and politely, using professional language at all times. Active listening. Listen attentively to the concerns of the public. Let the individual express their grievances fully without interruption. Acknowledge their feelings and concerns, showing empathy for their situation, even if they are upset or frustrated. Clear communication. Explain the rules and regulations regarding animal control policies clearly and succinctly. Use simple language and avoid jargon. Provide clear instructions on how the situation will be handled, explaining the steps you are taking. Offer solutions. When possible, offer solutions to the problem at hand. For example, if someone is violating leash laws, suggest alternatives or resources for proper training. Be open to discussing alternatives and compromise when feasible within the legal framework. Stay objective. Keep the conversation focused on the facts. Avoid personal opinions or judgments, especially if the situation involves contentious issues like animal welfare or ownership. Make sure the individual understands that your role is to enforce laws and protect animals, not to be punitive. De-escalation techniques. If tensions rise, use de-escalation techniques such as lowering your tone, stepping back, or offering time for the individual to calm down. Avoid escalating the situation by remaining patient and respectful. Mr. Thompson, an animal control officer, is investigating a complaint of animal neglect in a local neighborhood. Upon arrival, he finds a dog in a poorly kept yard with no access to food or water. The dog appears malnourished and is visibly suffering. What actions should Mr. Thompson take in this situation? Answer: in this scenario, Mr. Thompson is facing a case of potential animal cruelty and neglect. Given the visible signs of malnutrition and suffering, Mr. Thompson should follow a series of steps. Ensure immediate care for the animal. If the dog appears to be in distress or suffering, Mr. Thompson should contact a veterinarian or animal welfare organization immediately for assistance. If the situation is dire, he may need to take the dog into custody to prevent further harm, following the guidelines set out in animal protection laws. Document the scene. Take detailed photographs of the yard, the condition of the dog, and any other relevant evidence of neglect, such as lack of shelter, food, water, or medical care. Gather witness statements from neighbors or individuals who can corroborate the claim of neglect. Interview the owner. Mr. Thompson should speak to the animal's owner to understand the situation. If the owner is present, ask about the dog's care and the conditions of the property. Document the owner's responses thoroughly. Follow investigation procedures. Based on the severity of the neglect, Mr. Thompson should assess whether any local animal cruelty laws have been violated, such as under the Animal Welfare Act or similar local laws. Record all observations, actions taken, and interactions with the owner. Legal action. If the neglect is deemed severe, Mr. Thompson should refer the case to law enforcement or a prosecutor for potential legal action. The owner may face charges related to animal cruelty or neglect. Depending on the case, Mr. Thompson may need to issue citations or confiscate the animal for its safety. By ensuring that the dog's immediate needs are addressed, documenting the evidence, and following legal protocols, Mr. Thompson can effectively handle this case while adhering to animal protection laws. What are the key elements involved in documenting an animal control investigation for legal proceedings? Answer: proper documentation is crucial in animal control investigations, especially when legal proceedings are involved. Key elements that must be included in the documentation process are case identification. Assign a unique case number for tracking purposes. Include the names of the involved parties, including the complainant, the owner, if known, and the animal involved. Details of the incident. Document the date, time, and location of the incident. Include a detailed description of the alleged violation. G. Abuse, neglect, or illegal animal activities. Evidence collection. Record and photograph all physical evidence, such as the condition of the animal, living conditions, and any items that contribute to the case. G. Cages, food, or medications. Take clear, high-quality photographs and make written notes about what each photo depicts. Witness statements. Document statements from witnesses, including neighbors or individuals who observed the event. Record the exact wording of the statement and include witness contact details. Officer observations. The investigating officer must provide their professional assessment of the situation. This may include noting any signs of neglect or abuse. G. Poor coat condition, malnourishment, or physical injuries. The officer should explain the actions taken during the investigation and any steps made for animal welfare. Communication with the animal's owner. Document any interactions with the animal's owner or caretaker. This includes any admissions of neglect or details about their ability to provide proper care. By ensuring thorough documentation, animal control officers can support the integrity of the investigation and provide reliable evidence for any legal proceedings. How can animal control officers educate the public on leash laws, vaccinations, and neutering effectively? Answer: effective public education on leash laws, vaccinations, and neutering requires a strategic approach. Animal control officers can use several methods to raise awareness: community awareness campaigns, organize community events, such as pet fairs, workshops, or informational booths where the public can learn about important animal welfare issues, including leash laws, vaccinations, and neutering. Distribute educational materials like pamphlets, brochures, and posters that outline the legal requirements and benefits of complying with these laws. Use of social media and digital platforms. Animal control officers can leverage social media platforms, e.g., Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to share informative posts, videos, and infographics explaining the importance of leash laws, vaccinations, and neutering. Run online campaigns or contests that encourage responsible pet ownership and raise awareness about the legal consequences of non-compliance. Collaboration with local veterinarians and animal shelters. Partner with local veterinarians and animal shelters to promote low-cost vaccination and neutering programs, making it easier for pet owners to comply with regulations. Arrange joint informational sessions or distribute materials through clinics and shelters to educate pet owners directly. Public service announcements (SOS). Work with local media outlets to create PSs that educate the public on animal control laws. These could be aired on TV, radio, or social media platforms. Target key times such as holidays or summer months when pet ownership issues are most prevalent. Engage with schools and youth groups. Develop educational programs for schools and youth organizations to instill responsible pet ownership practices in children who can influence their families' behavior. Provide presentations on animal control laws and the importance of vaccinations and neutering for future generations of pet owners. What is the importance of evidence collection in animal control investigations, and what guidelines should officers follow to ensure the integrity of the evidence? Answer: evidence collection is critical in animal control investigations as it forms the foundation for any legal proceedings or enforcement actions. Proper handling and documentation of evidence ensure its admissibility in court and protect the rights of both the animals and the individuals involved. Key guidelines for evidence collection include chain of custody. Maintain a clear and documented chain of custody for all physical evidence. This ensures that the evidence is tracked from the scene to storage and it has not been tampered with or altered in any way. Ensure that every person who handles the evidence records their name, date, and the action they took with the evidence. Photographic evidence. Take clear and detailed photographs of the scene, the animal and any items relevant to the investigation. Include measurements or identifying features in the photos to provide context, e.g., tape measures to show the size of living spaces. Collect physical evidence. Collect and preserve physical evidence such as animal hair, excrement, or discarded food that can indicate neglect or abuse. Use appropriate containers and labeling for all items collected to avoid contamination. Witness testimonies. Gather statements from witnesses who can provide first-hand accounts of the abuse or neglect. These statements should be documented and signed by the witness. Documentation. Officers should create a detailed report that includes all observations, actions taken, and evidence collected. This report should be clear, concise, and objective to be used in any legal proceedings. By following proper evidence collection protocols, animal control officers protect the integrity of the investigation and strengthen the case for legal action. What are the main health and safety risks for animal control officers when handling dangerous animals, and how can these risks be mitigated? Answer: handling dangerous animals poses several health and safety risks for animal control officers, including physical injury, zoonotic diseases, and psychological stress. To mitigate these risks, officers must take precautions at every stage of the handling process. Key risks and mitigation strategies include risk of physical injury, bites, scratches, kicks. Always use proper protective equipment, such as gloves, long sleeves, and reinforced boots. Utilize animal control equipment like muzzles, catch poles, or cages to safely restrain animals. Risk of zoonotic diseases, rabies, toxoplasmosis, etc. Animal control officers should ensure they are vaccinated against common zoonotic diseases like rabies. Always wear gloves and masks when handling animals, especially those that may carry diseases. Psychological stress, trauma from animal behavior. Be trained in animal behavior to recognize warning signs of aggression or fear. Officers should avoid confrontation when possible and use calming techniques to de-escalate an animal's stress. Mental health support should be available to officers to manage the emotional toll of dealing with aggressive or distressed animals. Environmental hazards, traffic, unstable terrain. When capturing animals near busy roads or in unsafe areas, ensure that the location is secure and safe for both the officer and the animal. Use cones or other warning devices to alert oncoming traffic. Be aware of environmental factors like unstable terrain, especially in rural or wooded areas. Handling poisonous or venomous animals. In cases involving venomous or poisonous animals, e.g., snakes, spiders, officers should be specially trained and use appropriate equipment such as snake tongs or venom-proof gloves. Always call experts if handling such animals is beyond an officer's expertise. By following these safety protocols and undergoing proper training, animal control officers can minimize the risks associated with handling dangerous animals. What should animal control officers do when responding to reports of an animal hoarding situation? Answer: animal hoarding involves the accumulation of an excessive number of animals without the ability to provide proper care, often leading to neglect and suffering. Responding to such a situation requires a careful, compassionate, and structured approach. Key steps include assessment and safety. Ensure the safety of both the animals and the officers before entering the property. Hoarding situations often involve unsanitary or hazardous living conditions. It may be necessary to wear protective clothing, e.g., gloves, boots, masks, to prevent exposure to infectious agents. Evaluate the extent of the situation. Work with professionals such as veterinarians, animal welfare experts, and mental health specialists to assess the number of animals involved, their condition, and the living environment. This may require a complete inventory of the animals, including health assessments and any necessary medical treatment. Collaboration with other agencies. Animal hoarding cases often require collaboration with other agencies such as mental health professionals, law enforcement, and social services to address the root causes of hoarding behavior. Seizure and care of animals. If the animals are in immediate danger, it may be necessary to seize them. This should be done following all legal requirements, such as obtaining a warrant if required. After seizure, the animals should be transported to a safe environment where they can receive medical care, rehabilitation, and adoption if appropriate. Legal action. Depending on the severity of the hoarding situation, legal action may be required. This can include charges of animal cruelty or neglect. Proper documentation of the living conditions, animals' health, and the owner's behavior is crucial for any prosecution. Follow-up. Following the resolution of the case, officers should ensure that any ongoing care and support are provided to the animals. In some cases, follow-up visits to the home may be necessary if the individual is attempting to regain control over the situation. By following a careful, ethical, and legally compliant approach, animal control officers can ensure that animals are rescued from hoarding situations and receive the care they need. How can animal control officers identify signs of animal abuse or neglect, and what steps should they take to address these concerns? Answer: animal control officers need to be vigilant in identifying signs of abuse or neglect. Recognizing these signs early allows for timely intervention to protect the animal and hold offenders accountable. Signs of animal abuse or neglect. Physical signs: unexplained injuries such as cuts, bruises, fractures, or burns, malnourishment or extreme weight loss, poor coat conditions such as matted fur, bald spots, or visible parasites, e.g., fleas, ticks, dehydration evidenced by excessive thirst, sunken eyes or dry gums, lameness or difficulty walking, which may indicate untreated injuries or lack of proper veterinary care. Behavioral signs: fearful or aggressive behavior which may result from physical abuse, extreme submission or cowering, often a sign of long-term mistreatment, isolation from other animals or humans, or lack of socialization. Environmental signs: lack of proper shelter, food, or water, unsanitary living conditions such as feces or urine buildup, or exposure to extreme weather conditions, animals chained or confined to small, inappropriate spaces without adequate exercise or enrichment. Steps to address concerns: investigate and gather evidence. Upon receiving a report of possible abuse or neglect, conduct a thorough investigation, observe and document any signs of physical abuse or neglect, and take photographs as evidence. Provide immediate care. If the animal is in immediate danger or distress, arrange for its emergency medical treatment or seizure if necessary. Intervene and educate. If the abuse or neglect is not extreme but still concerning, consider educating the animal's owner about proper care, nutrition, and legal responsibilities. Follow-up and monitoring. After the animal is removed or treatment is provided, follow up to ensure the animal's well-being and continued safety. What is the role of animal control officers in preventing the spread of infectious diseases among animals, and how can they promote public health? Answer: animal control officers play a crucial role in preventing the spread of infectious diseases not only to animals, but also to humans. Zoonotic diseases. Their responsibilities include education, monitoring, enforcement, and coordination with other health agencies to safeguard both public and animal health. Key responsibilities: surveillance and monitoring. Regularly monitor animal populations for signs of disease outbreaks, especially in areas with high animal density. Shelters, animal hoarding situations, or feral animal colonies. Report and document any signs of infectious diseases such as rabies, parvovirus, distemper, or leptospirosis to the appropriate health authorities. Vaccination and preventative care. Educate the public on the importance of vaccinating pets against common infectious diseases including rabies, distemper, and parvovirus. Partner with local veterinary clinics or animal shelters to organize vaccination clinics, especially in underserved areas. Quarantine and isolation. In cases where infectious diseases are suspected, officers may need to isolate affected animals to prevent disease spread. For example, in the case of rabies or distemper, infected animals must be quarantined until they are cleared by a veterinarian. Enforce isolation requirements in animal shelters or animal control facilities to prevent cross-contamination between animals. Public education. Animal control officers should inform pet owners about the risks of zoonotic diseases and provide guidance on how to protect themselves and their animals. This includes promoting proper hygiene, regular veterinary visits, and responsible pet ownership practices. Host public seminars, workshops, and educational campaigns to raise awareness of zoonotic diseases and their transmission routes. Collaboration with health agencies. Work closely with public health departments, veterinarians, and other animal control agencies to identify and control disease outbreaks quickly in the event of a major outbreak. Help coordinate the vaccination, treatment, or culling of animals if necessary to protect public health.